The massive ships filled the sky above Earth like dark storm clouds. Admiral Vexhai stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the blue planet slowly turn beneath him. After 50 years of hunting humans across the galaxy, he had finally found their home world. Terra, he said the name with disgust. The humans called their planet Earth, but the Zephyrian Empire had its own name for every world they conquered. Soon this would just be another number in their vast collection of defeated civilizations. The Admiral's forearms crossed behind his back as he studied the planet below. It looked so ordinary. Blue oceans, white clouds, green and brown continents. Nothing special about it at all. Yet somehow, these humans had been the only species to resist the Empire's expansion for half a century. "Sir," his communications officer called out. "The orbital bombardment platforms are in position." Vexhai nodded slowly. The Zephyrian Empire controlled 10,000 star systems. They had conquered hundreds of different alien species. Some had fought bravely. Others had surrendered quickly. But none had been as troublesome as the humans. The war had started when human ships first appeared in Imperial space. They used strange tactics that made no sense to proper military minds. Instead of meeting the Imperial fleet in honorable battle, human ships would attack and then disappear. They would strike at supply lines, rescue prisoners, and vanish before reinforcements could arrive. The Empire had tracked them across dozens of star systems. Every time the Imperial fleet thought they had cornered the humans, the enemy ships would slip away. It was like fighting ghosts. The humans never seemed to have enough ships for a real war, but they were always there, always causing trouble. But now it was over. The Empire's best scouts had finally traced the human ships back to their source. This small, ordinary planet in an unremarkable star system. The home of the species that had dared to resist the mighty Zephyrian Empire. "Begin the bombardment," Admiral Vexhai ordered. The Imperial fleet opened fire. Bright beams of energy lanced down from orbit, striking military bases and major cities across the planet's surface. The humans had some defenses, but they were pathetic compared to Imperial technology. Primitive missiles that the fleet's shields easily absorbed. Energy weapons that barely scratched the hull plating of the smallest Imperial ships. Within hours, the major human military installations were destroyed. The fleet continued its bombardment throughout the day, targeting government buildings, communication centers, and transportation hubs. By evening, most of the planet's major cities were burning. The Admiral watched the destruction with satisfaction. He had expected the famous human resistance to last longer. Instead, they seemed to crumble as easily as any other primitive species. "Sir," the communications officer spoke again. "We're receiving a transmission from the planet's surface. They're asking to surrender." Vexhai's mandibles clicked together in what passed for a smile among his species. "Put them through." The main display showed a middle-aged human man in a torn military uniform. He looked exhausted and defeated. Behind him, smoke drifted past broken windows. "This is Acting President Chun of the United Earth Government," the human said. His voice was shaky. "I am authorized to negotiate our planet's surrender. Where are your other leaders?" Vexhai demanded. "Dead or missing," Chun replied. "The orbital bombardment destroyed most of our government centers. I'm all that's left with any authority to speak for our people." The Admiral studied the human's face. He had expected to see the fierce determination that human fighters had shown in space battles. Instead, he saw only fear and despair. Perhaps the humans were only brave when they could run away. "You will prepare for Imperial occupation," Vexhai told him. "All remaining military forces will surrender immediately. Any resistance will result in the complete destruction of your cities." "Understood," President Chun said quietly. "We surrender unconditionally." The transmission ended. Around the bridge, Vexhai's officers made sounds of approval. The troublesome human resistance was finally over, but the Admiral felt strangely unsatisfied. He had studied reports of human tactics for decades. They were clever, resourceful, and surprisingly effective despite their primitive technology. Yet when faced with a real attack on their homeworld, they had collapsed immediately. "Prepare landing forces," he ordered. "I want a complete survey of this planet. Find out what made these humans think they could fight the Empire." Over the next few days, Imperial troops landed across Earth's surface. They found a world that made no sense. The planet was hostile to most forms of life. The gravity was higher than comfortable for most species. The atmosphere contained corrosive oxygen. Deadly radiation from the local star constantly bombarded the surface. Worse, the planet seemed to actively try to kill its inhabitants. Massive storms regularly devastated whole continents. The ground shook without warning, destroying cities. Mountains exploded, covering the sky with poisonous ash. The oceans rose and fell unpredictably, washing away coastal settlements. Yet somehow, humans had not only survived on this death world, they had thrived. They built their cities in the most dangerous places, right along the edges of moving tectonic plates and active volcanic zones. They had learned to predict and survive disasters that would have wiped out most civilized species, but their technology was still primitive. Their weapons were basic chemical explosives and simple energy beams. Their ships used inefficient fusion drives instead of proper antimatter engines. Their computers were mechanical devices instead of quantum processors. Admiral Vexhai toured the human cities personally, trying to understand. How had these weak, primitive creatures with their inadequate technology managed to fight the Empire for 50 years? The humans he met seemed broken and defeated. They answered questions quietly, keeping their eyes down. They showed no sign of the fierce spirit that Imperial forces had encountered in space battles. It was as if the humans who had fought the Empire and the humans who lived on Earth were completely different species. "Gather their leaders," the Admiral finally ordered. "All of them. We'll hold a formal surrender ceremony. The entire Empire needs to see that even these troublesome humans can be conquered." The ceremony would be broadcast across all Imperial worlds. Every subject species would watch the humans kneel before Imperial authority. It would be a final demonstration that resistance to the Zephyrian Empire was futile. Admiral Vexhai looked out at the broken human cities one last time. Soon this would all be over, and he could return to more important conquests. The human problem had been solved at last. Admiral Vexhai was reviewing the final details for the surrender ceremony when his aide approached with a puzzled expression. "Sir, there's a human at the perimeter checkpoint. He claims to be a diplomat and wants to attend the ceremony." The Admiral's 4 eyes narrowed. "We already have their acting president. What use is another human politician?" "That's just it, sir. He's not really a politician. His credentials show he's something called a Deputy Undersecretary for Interstellar Relations. It seems to be a very minor position in their government." Vexhai sighed. Human government structures made no sense to him. They had dozens of different departments with overlapping responsibilities and ridiculous titles. What does he want? He's requesting an audience under what he calls Universal Diplomatic Protocols. He has proper documentation. The Admiral almost laughed. Universal Diplomatic Protocols were an ancient set of rules that most civilized species followed when conducting formal negotiations. The fact that humans even knew about them was surprising. That they would invoke them while surrendering was almost insulting. "Fine," Vexhai said. "Bring him in. But keep guards nearby. These humans might try some desperate trick." 20 minutes later, the human diplomat was escorted into the Admiral's temporary command center. Vexhai looked him over and felt his suspicion fade into amusement. The man was completely ordinary. Middle-aged, with thinning brown hair and a soft belly that suggested he spent too much time behind a desk. He wore a simple black suit that looked old and cheap. Large glasses perched on his nose, and he carried a worn briefcase that had seen better days. "Admiral Vesai," the man said with a nervous smile. "I'm Marcus Webb, Deputy Undersecretary for Interstellar Relations. Thank you for agreeing to see me." His voice was quiet and polite. He spoke with a slight stutter that made him sound even more harmless. Everything about him screamed harmless bureaucrat. "What do you want, human?" The Admiral asked. Webb fumbled with his briefcase, pulling out a small notebook and a cheap plastic pen. "Well, sir, I was hoping I could attend the surrender ceremony tomorrow. As a representative of our diplomatic corps, I thought it would be appropriate for someone from my department to be present. Your planet has already surrendered. Your president will handle the ceremony." "Oh yes, absolutely," Webb said quickly. "President Chun has full authority to speak for our government. I wouldn't dream of interfering with that. I just thought, well, for the historical record, you understand. This is rather an important moment." Vexai studied the nervous little man. He seemed genuinely anxious to please. "You may attend as an observer. Nothing more." "Thank you, sir." "That's very generous." Webb made a note in his little book. "I hope you don't mind me asking, but would it be possible to get some background information? For the official record, you understand. How many ships do you have in your fleet? What are your home worlds like? That sort of thing." The Admiral was taken aback by the casual nature of the request. "Why would you need such information?" Webb looked embarrassed. "Oh, it's just standard procedure. When we have first contact with a new civilization, we're supposed to gather basic cultural and political information. I know it seems silly now, given the circumstances, but I've been doing this job for 23 years. Old habits, you know." Despite himself, Vexai found the human's nervousness almost endearing. It was clear that Webb was completely out of his depth, but still trying to do his job properly. "The Zephyrian Empire spans 10,000 star systems," he said. "We have 14 core worlds and hundreds of subject species." "Fascinating," Webb said, scribbling notes. "And your military structure? I mean, obviously, you have a very impressive fleet, but how is it organized?" Over the next hour, the Admiral found himself answering Webb's questions almost without thinking. The human was so obviously harmless, so genuinely interested, that it was easy to talk to him. Webb asked about Zephyrian culture, their government, their military traditions. He took careful notes and asked thoughtful follow-up questions. "Your core worlds," Webb said at one point. "Are they all heavily defended?" "I imagine they must be, given the size of your empire." "Of course," Vexai replied. "Each core world has its own defense fleet. Selthara alone has over 200 ships stationed in permanent orbit." 200, Webb repeated, writing it down. "That's incredible." "And the others?" "Similar numbers. Vextai Prime has 300. Mordun has about 150, but it's a fortress world anyway." Webb nodded thoughtfully. It must be quite a challenge to coordinate such a vast military force. "How do you manage communications across so many systems?" The Admiral explained the Empire's quantum communication network, the relay stations that connected distant worlds, the command codes that allowed instant communication with any Imperial facility. Webb listened intently, occasionally asking for clarification on technical details, that it wasn't until much later that Vexai realized how much information he had shared. But Webb was just a minor diplomat from a conquered world. What possible use could such knowledge be to him? As the day progressed, Webb spent time talking to various Imperial officers. He introduced himself politely, apologized for his poor language skills, and asked simple questions about their families and homeworlds. Most of the officers found him pleasant enough, if rather dull. Commander Zextel told him about growing up on the agricultural world of Nimra. Captain Verhan described the crystal cities of Keltas. Security Chief Mulver mentioned his brother's recent promotion to the defense command of Vextai Prime. Webb listened to all of them with the same polite interest. He took his little notes and thanked everyone for their time. He seemed genuinely fascinated by Zephyrian culture and eager to learn everything he could. That evening, as Webb was preparing to return to his temporary quarters, he stopped by the command center one last time. "Admiral," he said hesitantly, "I hope I haven't been too much of a bother today. I know you have important preparations to make." "It's fine," Vexai said. He had actually found the humans' company surprisingly pleasant. After decades of dealing with conquered species who were either terrified or hostile, Webb's genuine curiosity had been refreshing. "I brought some coffee," Webb said, pulling a thermos from his briefcase. "It's a human drink. I thought you might like to try it, though I should warn you, most species find it rather bitter. Some even consider it mildly toxic." The Admiral politely declined, but he appreciated the gesture. Webb poured himself a cup and sipped it thoughtfully. "Tomorrow's ceremony," Webb said. "It's going to be broadcast across your empire, isn't it?" "Yes, all Imperial worlds will witness your species' final defeat." Webb nodded slowly. "That's quite an audience. 10,000 star systems, hundreds of subject species. They'll all be watching. They will see what happens to those who resist the Empire." "Yes," Webb said quietly, staring into his coffee cup. "I suppose they will." He finished his drink and packed up his thermos. "Well, I should let you get back to your preparations. Thank you again for your patience today, Admiral. I'll see you tomorrow." As the humble diplomat left, Admiral Vexhai felt a strange sense of unease. Something about their conversation bothered him, but he couldn't put his finger on what it was. Webb had been nothing but polite and helpful. His questions had been innocent enough. Still, as the Admiral reviewed his notes for the ceremony, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had forgotten something important. The ceremony took place in the ruins of what had once been the United Nations building in New York. The orbital bombardment had destroyed most of the structure, but enough remained standing to serve as a symbol. Admiral Vexhai had chosen the location deliberately. Let the humans surrender in the wreckage of their most important diplomatic center. Imperial cameras captured every angle as Zephyrian officers took their places around a large table made from salvaged materials. The broadcast would reach every corner of the Empire within hours. Billions of beings would witness humanity's final defeat. Acting President Chun sat across from Admiral Vexhai, looking exhausted and broken. His hands shook slightly as he reviewed the surrender documents. The terms were harsh but standard for a conquered world. Complete disarmament, technology transfer, tribute payments, and integration into Imperial society as a servant class. Marcus Webb sat quietly to one side, still clutching his warm briefcase. He had arrived early and spent the morning making polite conversation with Imperial staff members. Several officers had commented on how pleasant the human diplomat was, especially compared to their defeated president. "The terms are clear," Admiral Vexhai announced for the cameras. "Your species will lay down all weapons immediately. Your technology will be transferred to Imperial control. Your people will serve the Empire faithfully." President Chun nodded weakly. "We understand and accept these terms." Webb raised his hand politely. "Excuse me, Admiral. I hope you don't mind if I suggest a few small amendments, just to help make the transition smoother for everyone." The Admiral was surprised by the interruption. He had expected the diplomat to sit quietly through the ceremony, but Webb looked so nervous and apologetic that refusing would seem petty. "What kind of amendments?" Vexhai asked. Webb pulled out his notebook and flipped through several pages. "Well, for instance, Article 7 mentions the preservation of cultural sites. I was wondering if we could include some specific protections for places like the Sistine Chapel and Angkor Wat. I know they're not strategically important, but they do have historical value." The Admiral glanced at his advisors. The request seemed harmless enough. "Acceptable. Thank you," Webb said, making a note. And Article 12 discusses food distribution networks. I was thinking we might want to maintain the existing grain storage facilities in the American Midwest and the rice distribution centers in Southeast Asia. Otherwise, you might have supply problems during the transition period. Again, the suggestion made practical sense. Vexhai nodded his agreement. Webb continued with a series of similar requests. Protection for certain hospitals and schools. Maintenance of power grids in major population centers. Preservation of water treatment plants. Each suggestion was reasonable and well thought out, but as he spoke, the Admiral began to notice something odd. Webb seemed to know quite a lot about Imperial standard practices for occupation. He mentioned procedures that were classified military information, known only to senior Imperial officers. In Article 15, Webb said, consulting his notes, you mentioned the establishment of administrative zones. Based on your usual protocols, I assume you'll want to set up regional command centers in London, Moscow, Beijing, and Sao Paulo. Those locations typically work best for managing populations of this size. Admiral Vexhai felt a chill run down his spine. How did this minor human diplomat know about Imperial occupation protocols? Those procedures were military secrets, developed over centuries of conquest. How do you know our usual protocols? The Admiral asked slowly. Webb looked up from his notebook with a confused expression. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to assume. It's just that similar arrangements have worked well on other worlds, haven't they? Kelthra, Vexmon, Zordai. The population distributions are roughly comparable. The Admiral's four eyes widened in shock. Kelthra, Vexmon, and Zordai were Imperial worlds that had been conquered decades ago. The details of their occupation were classified at the highest levels. No human should know those names, let alone understand how they had been administered. Where did you learn those names? Vexhai demanded. Webb blinked owlishly behind his glasses. I'm sorry. Did I say something wrong? I thought it was common knowledge. I mean, your empire does span 10,000 systems. Word gets around, even to backwater planets like ours. The explanation sounded reasonable, but something in Webb's tone made the Admiral uncomfortable. The human was still polite and nervous, but there was something else underneath. Something calculating. Perhaps we could continue with the ceremony, Webb suggested gently. I don't want to hold up your schedule. I know you have other important business to attend to. As they returned to the formal proceedings, Webb made more casual comments that sent chills through the Imperial officers. He mentioned the recent expansion into the Outer Rim systems, using specific star charts that were supposed to be classified. He asked about the status of rebellious colonies that the Empire preferred not to discuss publicly. He even inquired about the health of Admiral Mortal's family on Zephyr Prime. Each individual comment seemed innocent enough, but together they painted a picture of impossible knowledge. This insignificant human diplomat somehow knew military secrets, family details, and political intelligence that should have been completely unavailable to him. Mr. Webb, Admiral Vexhai said during a break in the proceedings, I'm curious about your background. How long have you worked in your diplomatic service? 23 years, Webb replied with a modest smile. I started as a junior clerk in the Department of Alien Contact back when we thought we were alone in the universe. Worked my way up slowly. Nothing dramatic, just steady service. And during this war, what were your duties? Webb looked embarrassed. Oh, nothing important. I mostly filed reports and updated contact databases. Sometimes I helped translate captured communications when we could get them. Basic clerical work, really. Translate communications? The Admiral leaned forward. From what languages? Well, Zephyrian, mostly. Also some Kelthurian and Mordan dialects. I have a talent for languages, I suppose, though I'm still not very fluent in any of them. Admiral Vexhai felt the room grow cold. Keltharian and Mordan were Imperial languages spoken only by specific military units. The grammar and vocabulary were classified information, taught only to intelligence officers and deep cover agents. Who taught you these languages? The Admiral asked in fluent Keltarian without hesitation. Webb replied in the same language. I picked them up from intercepted communications over the years. Your people are quite chatty on open channels. The casual response, delivered in perfect Keltharian with the proper military accent, left the Admiral speechless. Webb had just demonstrated language skills that would take decades to develop. Learn from sources that supposedly didn't exist. Shall we finish the ceremony? Webb suggested, switching back to English. I believe President Chun is eager to get this over with. The formal proceedings concluded with the signing of surrender documents. President Chun added his signature with a shaking hand, officially ending human resistance to the Imperial conquest. The cameras captured every moment for broadcast across the Empire. As the ceremony ended, Webb approached Admiral Vexhai one final time. Thank you for allowing me to participate, Admiral. This has been a fascinating experience. He paused, checking his old wristwatch. I suppose I should head home soon. Long day tomorrow. What happens tomorrow? The Admiral asked. Webb smiled pleasantly. Oh, just paperwork. Always more paperwork in diplomatic service. Though I suspect things will be quite different from now on. As the human diplomat walked away, Admiral Vexhai tried to shake off his growing sense of unease. The ceremony had gone perfectly. Earth was conquered, humanity was defeated, and the Empire had gained another subject world. So why did he feel like he had just made a terrible mistake? Admiral Vexhai couldn't sleep that night. He kept thinking about Marcus Webb and all the things the human diplomat had said during the ceremony. The more he thought about it, the more disturbed he became. He called for his security chief. I want a complete background check on the human diplomat. Everything about him. Sir? Commander Mulver seemed surprised. He's just a minor bureaucrat. What could he possibly? Just do it, Vexhai snapped. I want to know everything. His education, his work history, his family, his friends. Everything. The investigation took most of the night. When Mulver returned the next morning, he looked puzzled. Sir, the human's credentials check out perfectly. Marcus Webb, age 47, married with 2 children. Born in a place called Ohio. Studied at something called Georgetown University. Majored in international relations and linguistics. Started working for the human government right after graduation. What about his language training? According to his records, he's self-taught in most alien languages. His supervisors note that he has an unusual talent for picking up new languages quickly. They assigned him to translation duties early in the war. Admiral Vexhai frowned. What kind of translations? Intercepted communications, mostly. It says here that he processed over 10,000 Imperial transmissions during the war. Radio chatter, supply reports, personal messages between officers. Standard intelligence work. The Admiral felt his unease growing. 10,000 transmissions would contain enormous amounts of sensitive information. Fleet movements, family details, military procedures, political discussions. If Webb had really processed all of that data over 50 years, he would know more about the Imperial military than most Imperial officers. Bring him in for questioning, Vexhai ordered. An hour later, Marcus Webb sat across from the Admiral in a small interrogation room. He looked as nervous and harmless as ever, clutching his briefcase and adjusting his glasses. I hope there's no problem, Admiral. Webb said politely. Have I done something wrong? I want to know how you learned so much about Imperial military procedures. Webb looked confused. I'm sorry, sir. I don't understand the question. Yesterday, during the ceremony, you demonstrated knowledge of classified Imperial information. Occupation protocols, star charts, military communications. Information that should be impossible for a human to obtain. Oh, Webb said with obvious relief. Is that all? I thought I had committed some diplomatic error. He opened his briefcase and pulled out several thick folders. I've been studying your empire for quite some time, Admiral. It's my job to understand the people we're dealing with. He spread the folders across the table. They were filled with handwritten notes, printed reports, and what looked like transcripts of audio recordings. The Admiral picked up one of the files and began reading. It was a detailed analysis of Imperial fleet movements over the past 5 years. The data was incredibly accurate, including ship names, commander assignments, and deployment schedules. Another folder contained personal profiles of hundreds of Imperial officers, with information about their families, their career histories, and their current assignments. Where did you get all this? Vexai demanded. Radio intercepts mostly, Webb replied. Your people talk quite a lot on open channels. Personal messages, supply requests, status reports. Over 50 years, it adds up to quite a database. The Admiral continued reading. The files contained information that should have been impossible to gather through radio intercepts alone. Private conversations between high-ranking officers. Detailed specifications of new ship designs. Political discussions that had taken place in secure conference rooms. Some of this information never went over radio channels, Vexai said slowly. Webb shrugged apologetically. You'd be surprised what people will say when they think no one is listening. Your officers aren't very careful about operational security, I'm afraid. Explain this, the Admiral said, pointing to a transcript. This is a conversation between myself and Fleet Admiral Callahan that took place in a secure facility on Zephyr Prime, 6 months ago. Webb leaned over to look at the document. Oh yes, that was during the strategic planning meeting for the final assault on Earth. Very interesting discussion. By the way, I particularly liked Admiral Callahan's suggestion about using psychological warfare tactics. How could you possibly know what was said in that meeting? Trade secret, I'm afraid, Webb said with a small smile. Professional diplomats have their methods. Admiral Vexai felt a chill run through him. That meeting had been held in the most secure facility in the Empire, with quantum-encrypted communications and psi-shielding to prevent mental infiltration. There were only 12 beings in the entire galaxy who had access to that information. I want to know who you really are, he said quietly. Webb looked hurt. I've been completely honest with you, Admiral. I'm exactly who I claim to be. Marcus Webb, Deputy Undersecretary for Interstellar Relations. 23 years of faithful service to the human government. No minor diplomatic clerk could know what you know. You underestimate human bureaucracy, Webb said with a chuckle. We're very thorough when it comes to paperwork. Did you know that during this war, I personally reviewed and cataloged over 50,000 separate intelligence reports? Radio intercepts, prisoner interrogations, captured documents, surveillance data. I have an excellent memory for details. The Admiral stared at the mild-mannered man across from him. Webb still looked like nothing more than a nervous government worker. But the intelligence files told a different story. This unassuming human had somehow assembled a complete picture of Imperial military operations that would be the envy of any intelligence agency. What else do you know? Vexai asked. Webb consulted his notebook. Well, let's see. The Empire currently has active military operations in 47 star systems. Your main supply depot for the Outer Rim campaigns is located in the Vextal system. Fleet Admiral Morin's task force is due for resupply next week. Admiral Zelkai's daughter just graduated from the Imperial Naval Academy. Should I go on? Each casual revelation hit the Admiral like a physical blow. Webb was reciting information that would have taken years to collect, analyzed by teams of expert intelligence officers. Yet he spoke about it as if he were reading a grocery list. The rebellion in the Andromeda sector, Webb continued conversationally. That's been keeping you busy lately, hasn't it? 3 separate species have declared independence from Imperial rule. Your forces are spread pretty thin trying to contain them. Admiral Vex High had heard enough. Guards! He called out. The door opened and 2 Imperial soldiers entered the room. Arrest this human, Vex High ordered. Full security protocols. Webb looked genuinely surprised. Admiral, is this really necessary? I was just answering your questions. Search him. Search his belongings. Find out how he's been gathering this information. The soldiers conducted a thorough search of Webb and his briefcase. They found nothing suspicious. No hidden recording devices, no encrypted communicators, no advanced technology of any kind. Just notebooks, pens, and what appeared to be decades' worth of handwritten notes. They brought in scanning equipment to check for concealed implants or biological modifications. The results showed a completely normal human being with no unusual augmentations. Medical scans confirmed that Webb was exactly what he appeared to be. A middle-aged bureaucrat with slightly high blood pressure and mild nearsightedness. I don't understand, Webb said as the guards released him. What did you expect to find? Admiral Vex High looked at the scan results in disbelief. Every piece of technology they had used confirmed that Marcus Webb was an ordinary human with no special abilities or hidden equipment. Yet he possessed information that should have been impossible for anyone outside the Imperial High Command to obtain. How? The Admiral asked quietly. Webb straightened his tie and picked up his briefcase. Admiral, I've been studying your empire for 50 years. I've read every transmission, analyzed every pattern, memorized every detail. When you spend half a century learning about something, you tend to become quite knowledgeable about it. He paused at the door. Is there anything else you need from me? I should probably get back to my hotel. My wife is expecting a call, and she worries when I'm out too late. As Webb left the room, Admiral Vex High slumped in his chair. Nothing made sense anymore. The human was obviously just what he claimed to be, a minor government worker with good language skills and a talent for organizing information. But somehow, this unremarkable little man knew more about the Zephyrian Empire than most. Zephyrian generals. The Admiral reached for his communicator to contact Imperial intelligence. Someone needed to explain how a human filing clerk had managed to penetrate their most closely guarded secrets. But as he activated the device, he realized he was afraid to learn the answer. The final ceremony was scheduled for noon. Admiral Vex High stood before the assembled cameras, preparing to broadcast humanity's complete defeat to every corner of the Zephyrian Empire. 10,000 star systems would witness this moment. Hundreds of subject species would see what happened to those who dared resist. Imperial rule. The surrender documents had been signed. Earth's government had formally submitted to Imperial authority. Human military forces had laid down their weapons. It was over. Yet the Admiral couldn't shake his growing sense of dread. Something was wrong. Everything had gone too smoothly. The humans had collapsed too quickly. And Marcus Webb knew far too much for a simple diplomatic clerk. Sir, his communications officer called out. All Imperial networks are ready for broadcast. We have confirmed reception across the entire empire. Vex High nodded. In a few minutes, he would address the galaxy and announce humanity's final defeat. It should have been the proudest moment of his career. Instead, he felt like he was walking into a trap. Marcus Webb approached the Admiral one last time before the broadcast. He still looked like the same nervous bureaucrat who had appeared 3 days ago. But now Vexai saw something different in his eyes. Something calculating and cold. "Admiral," Webb said politely, "I wanted to thank you for your patience over the past few days. This has been a remarkable experience." "The ceremony will begin shortly," Vexai replied stiffly. "Of course. Though before it does, I wanted to give you something." Webb reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small device. "A gift from the people of Earth." The Admiral examined the object suspiciously. It looked like a simple communication tablet, the kind used for basic data storage. "What is it?" "Just some light reading," Webb said with a smile. "Historical documents, you might say. I thought you might find them interesting." Against his better judgment, Vexai activated the tablet. The screen displayed what appeared to be a standard Imperial military report. But as he read, his blood grew cold. It was a complete breakdown of Imperial fleet positions throughout the galaxy. Not just the general information that Webb had mentioned before, but precise coordinates, ship numbers, commander names, and tactical assessments. The data was current as of yesterday. "How did you get this?" The Admiral whispered. "Keep reading," Webb suggested quietly. The next document was a detailed analysis of Imperial supply lines, including shipment schedules, cargo manifests, and security protocols. After that came personnel files for thousands of Imperial officers, complete with psychological profiles and family information. But it was the final section that made Admiral Vexai's 4 hearts stop. Beating. It was a comprehensive plan for the simultaneous liberation of every subject species in the Empire. Target lists for key installations. Communication codes for rebel groups. Detailed tactical instructions for coordinated strikes across hundreds of star systems. And at the bottom of each page was a simple signature. Earth Intelligence Service. "You're not a diplomat," Vexai said slowly. Webb's nervous demeanor fell away like a discarded mask. When he spoke again, his voice was calm and confident. "Oh, I really am a diplomat, Admiral. Deputy Undersecretary for Interstellar Relations. That part is completely true. I just have some additional responsibilities." The Admiral looked around desperately. His guards were in position. His officers were ready for the broadcast. Everything appeared normal. But he suddenly realized that nothing was what it seemed. "How long?" he asked. 50 years, Webb replied casually. "Ever since your ships first appeared in our space. You see, Admiral, you made a fundamental mistake. You assumed that because we couldn't match your military technology, we couldn't fight you effectively." Webb checked his watch, the same cheap timepiece he had worn throughout their meetings. "But humans have been fighting wars for thousands of years. We've learned that victory doesn't always go to the side with the best weapons. Sometimes it goes to the side that's willing to be patient." "The war," Vexai said with growing horror. "The 50 years of fighting." "A delaying action," Webb confirmed. "We needed time to study your empire, to understand how it worked, to identify its weaknesses. Every battle you won gave us more intelligence. Every prisoner you took told us more about your culture. Every communication you sent gave us deeper access to your networks." The Admiral's mind raced back through decades of military reports. Human ships that had fought just hard enough to make their defeats look convincing. Prisoners who had seemed broken but had somehow escaped with crucial information. Communications intercepts that had been a little too easy to obtain. "The resistance was never about winning battles," Webb continued. "It was about learning everything we could about your empire while making you believe we were just another primitive species to be conquered. But your technology is still primitive." Vexai protested weakly. Webb smiled. "What you've seen is our civilian technology, Admiral. What we wanted you to see. Did you really think a species that could survive on a world like Earth couldn't develop proper military hardware when necessary. As if summoned by his words, alarms began blaring throughout the Imperial fleet. The communications officer turned to Admiral Vex High with a look of panic. "Sir, we're receiving emergency signals from across the Empire. Fleets are reporting massive attacks at the core worlds." "What?" Vex High spun toward the tactical display. Red warning icons were appearing faster than he could count them. Zephyr Prime, Morden, Kelthra, all 14 core worlds were showing attack alerts. "It's not possible," he breathed. "Our defenses." Webb consulted his notebook, the same simple book he had carried throughout their meetings. "Let's see. Zephyr Prime's defense grid should be going offline right about now. We identified the command codes 3 years ago. Morden shield generators will fail in approximately 4 minutes. As for the others," the tactical display erupted in chaos. Reports flooded in from across the Empire. Defense platforms destroyed, communication networks jammed, supply depots captured. It was happening simultaneously across thousands of light years. How? Admiral Vex High demanded. 50 years of patient intelligence gathering, Webb replied. Every piece of information you shared, every casual conversation your officers had, every detail about your families and your worlds. We cataloged all of it, analyzed it, used it. The Admiral stared at the friendly, unremarkable man who had just revealed himself as the architect of the Empire's destruction. The surrender ceremony was broadcast across all Imperial networks as planned, Webb confirmed. But the signal included some additional data. Activation codes for rebel groups that have been waiting for this moment. Tactical information we've been gathering for decades. Instructions for coordinated strikes that your own communication system just delivered to every oppressed species in your empire. More alarms sounded. The communications officer's voice cracked with fear as he read the incoming reports. Sir, the Andromedans have declared total war. The Keltharian colonies are in open revolt. Even the Mordon homeworld is reporting uprising. Webb nodded approvingly. They've all been waiting for this day, Admiral. 50 years ago, when your empire first encountered humanity, you made a crucial error. You assumed that because we looked weak, we actually were weak. But humans don't survive on death worlds by being weak. He stood up and straightened his cheap suit jacket. We survive by being patient, by being thorough, by learning everything we can about our enemies before we make our move. Admiral Vex High's legs gave out. He collapsed into his chair, staring at the tactical display as his empire crumbled before his eyes. But the surrender documents were indeed a formal surrender, Webb agreed. Earth's unconditional surrender to the Zephyrian Empire. But they were also a declaration of war, broadcast under your own command codes to every corner of your empire. A war declaration against oppression itself, signed with the full authority of the Imperial fleet. Webb leaned closer, his voice dropping to a conversational whisper. You see, Admiral, there are rules to this game. Rules that humans learned a very long time ago. And the most important rule is this. He paused, letting the moment stretch out as explosions bloomed across the tactical display. Rule number 1. Never let them know what you're really capable of until it's too late. The Admiral looked up at him with desperate eyes. Your fleet. Where is your real fleet? Webb smiled pleasantly. Oh, they arrived about an hour ago. Stealth technology that we developed specifically for this moment. Right now, they're taking positions around every major Imperial installation in this sector. As for the rest of the Empire, he gestured toward the chaos on the tactical display. Well, let's just say that 50 years of intelligence work has been very thorough. This is impossible, Vex High whispered. Admiral, Webb said gently, you conquered hundreds of species over the centuries, but you made one critical mistake. You never bothered to ask what would happen if they all decided to fight back at the same time. He picked up his briefcase and headed toward the door. Oh, and there's one more thing. Those surrender documents you signed? There was a clause buried in the diplomatic language. Article 47, subsection 12. It formally transferred command authority of all Imperial forces in this sector to Earth's diplomatic service.